webinar by Fabernovel. I'm Adrien. I will be your host today, partner at Fabernovel, in charge of the food and agriculture practice. Fabernovel is a design, technology, and marketing agency founded in 2003, and we help companies craft their best future selves all over the world, from Paris, where we have our headquarters, Shanghai, Singapore, San Francisco, Casablanca, and Beirut. Today, I will be joined a bit later on by Montse Muñoz from Danone and Vandenbossche from Globale. During this webinar, we'll be exploring how food systems have evolved over time, what place innovation and technology have in its ongoing transformation, and what are the challenges at stake. As an introduction, I'd like to take a trip back in time, 150 to 100 years ago, to notice how technology has changed the way we produce food. From human labor helped by traction animal, completely on the left, to machinery replacing human labor, part of human labor, but still with lots of horses, as you can see on the picture, to having horses displaced by petroleum, completely on the right. And adding a bit of chemistry to the mix for pesticides and fertilizers, the famous NPK triptych. Mechanization had two main effects. The first was to drastically change workforce repartition. From 40–50% of the labor force in agriculture a century ago to roughly 2% today. Without mechanization, it's very unlikely that we'll be attending all of us a webinar today. And second, it was to make the food cheaper and widely available. If you look on the right, we see that the share of disposable income allocated to food went from 25% in the 30s to roughly 10% today. And globally, that has enabled a food system that is working pretty well at producing and distributing food at scale. Even though during COVID and confinement times last year, supply chains were disturbed, people in the Western world don't fear famine and starvation. It has disappeared from the collective memory. And the cost of food did not go to the roof during the confinement. If we look at the food price index in the US and the EU from January to July 2020, there was only a moderate increase during the confinement time. But still, there was a lot of waste generated as food supply chain outputs, specifically for restoration, were closed, and suppliers unable to adapt packaging format rapidly to more consumer-friendly sizes, ended up tossing to the trash a lot of food. So the food system delivers food at scale and affordably. However, of course, there are some negative side effects from the way the food system is built. First, the reign of cheap calories is making people sick. Number of overweight and obese adults exploded all over the world, and the food-related pathologies, such as diabetes, cancer, exploded as well. Secondly, we waste roughly a third of what we produce, and that would be enough to feed the 800 million hungry people. Where food waste happen depends on a lot of where food is produced. It happens mostly downstream in the Western world and upstream in developing countries due to a lacking of storing facilities and cool transportation. And the third is that 20 to 25% of our greenhouse gases emissions stems from agriculture due to fertilizers, enteric fermentation, land use change, deforestation, etc., plus the impact of biodiversity loss and pressure on water resources. So when we look at this picture, it has both positive and negative sides, and we wonder what were the weak signals today indicating that things were progressively changing positively. So we'd like to invite you to a journey in 2050, considering three facts for this trip. First is that more and more people live in urban hubs, and this is only increasing. Filling cities is a real logistical challenge, and we believe innovation and technology can help here. Second, people, unfortunately, spend less and less time cooking, so everything that will help city dwellers prepare meals more easily will be key in the transformation. And third, we start to have estimates on the impact of climate change on agricultural yields. So innovation aiming at making agriculture more resilient will have a strong position in the future. And last but not least, every perspective recommends that the average meal should contain less animal proteins and more veg protein, cereals, and vegetables to be sustainable. So with that in mind, let's go. So I'd like you to meet Mark. Mark is 40 and work part from home, part from a co-working space. When going to the co-working, he orders his lunch through an online meal service. Meals are delivered daily by a bike coursier and stored in a connected fridge, where he goes and picks up his meal and eats it. His account is automatically debited when doing so, and part of his meal's ingredients are sourced locally by the food catering company. After his meal box is collected for wash and reuse by the next day by the same coursier that stores the fruit the previous day. The first trend underlying this scenario is on-demand canteens. Office meals and collective catering are transforming very rapidly. Startups are leveraging new supply chains and on-demand delivery models and short circuits to bundle product sourcing, meal preparation, delivery, and packaging and upcycling. They are encroaching on the likes of Elior, Sodexo businesses by starting from the bottom, small and medium businesses, with a more qualitative offering. This trend also goes with the fragmentation of work trend, where people don't come to the office every day. Hence, having a 500 customer canteen can prove too costly if every day only 30 to 40% of the workforce is there. New players can better adapt the offer to the demand with lower fixed cost. And there is a huge window of opportunity, as in Europe at least, 1 in 2 meal is taken at the workplace. Parenthesis, that was prior to COVID. But the challenges for this model is to lower churn, because customer acquisition cost can be high, and the only way to amortize them in the long run is to keep a customer for as long as possible. Foodle is one of these examples. So it's a French startup offering these services. They set up fridge in co-working spaces in a company hall and collect data through fridge, what customer orders, what they look at, to help refine menu offering and better predict demands. Meals are prepared in a centralized kitchen and delivered daily. On top of the fridge plus delivery model, they even started to build mini cafes and full-fledged restaurants with a waiter inside companies. And we believe going physical will also be a key driver for customer retention for this type of model. Second trend underlying the scenario is dark kitchen. What is a dark kitchen? Well, basically, it's a restaurant where the only thing left is a kitchen. No room for service and no waiters. Hence, a 4 to 6 times lower initial investment. A single kitchen can cater to several cuisine styles with no need for refitting a whole restaurant. The leverage point is in the customer relationship and branding, as every Bao Burger or Pad Thai dark kitchen brand is fighting for visibility in Deliveroo or Uber Eats search results. There is thus a risk of brand commoditization if everybody does the same cuisine style. In addition, it's a model that still generates a lot of packaging waste, and there are companies trying to solve that. And we can also wonder whether worker conditions on this delivery platform are something that we wish for. But when most restaurants are closed due to COVID, we see this type of model having a really bright future should the previously mentioned challenge be tackled. Taster is one of these companies. It's a French startup. They built 5 food brands, so all of which are prepared in one single kitchen, from Thai, Japanese to Chinese rolls. They mutualize the cost of running a kitchen in all 5 brands and can easily pivot from one brand to another if consumers lose interest for one of their brands. So let's go back to Mark. He will go grocery shopping. So yes, we'd like to think it still exists in 2050, and that not everything will be delivered to our front door by robots, drones, and bike coursier. During the week, Mark and his family choose a list of meals they want to eat. It automatically creates a shopping list taking into account what's already at home, what will be ordered online, and it even have recommendations on where to find rare items like this Indian spice he loves so much. When going to the market, Mark looked for some products coming from short circuits, not only vegetables, but also cakes, yogurts, etc. Mark still eats meat, but he reduced a bit his consumption and purchases leguminous and cereals as complements to have a protein-rich diet. So the first trend underlying this scenario is short-circuit farm-to-table short circuits. We heard a lot about short food supply chain during the confinement time, and it's true that it's a model that is growing in popularity and can cater to consumer demand for transparency and traceability and social impact. In France, 1 in 5 farmers sell part of their production in short circuits, and we believe this model has a bright future as tech can enable complex and local supply chain management at scale. Logistics, it's true, is being a real challenge for short circuits. Moreover, as fresh products command only 20 to 25% of food purchases, we think that in order to capture more value, farmers need to develop and sell more transformed products. Cakes, sauce, and prepared meat, for instance. The scale of the model will come from mutualization of fixed logistics and supply chains cost and customer traffic generation. It should not be forgotten that the impact of transportation can also be a challenge in these models as products travel in smaller batches, small trucks instead of cargos, containers, and trucks. But it's also an opportunity to sustain local and non-outsourceable jobs. In that sense, Promus is a very initiative that we've seen. They build logistic solutions for short circuits in the form of cool containers where farmers can store their production. Customers, which are markets and restaurants, can then come and pick up their orders straight from the container. They also digitize the whole product catalog for a given farm, thus helping farmers advertise their production to potential buyers on Promus website. By doing so, Promus intermediates the relationship between farmers and buyer by bundling it with local logistic and supply chain solutions. And so we believe Promus has a real potential to become an enabler of the short-circuit distribution model. The second trend underlying the scenario of Mark going grocery shopping are plant-based protein. Plant-based protein are seen as good candidates to substitute part of our animal protein consumption. They have additional health and environmental benefits, such as storing nitrogen in the soil. But consumer acceptance is a real challenge, and this is where culinary creativity is key for adoption, to go beyond meatless steak made of soybeans. It's especially key in a world where meat demand is projected to grow by 70% by 2050. But we should not forget that zero meat consumption is not necessarily the optimum, as animals also have a real utility in grazing non-arable pastures, in providing manure, and in maintaining landscapes. There are many startups trying to build meat alternatives, and I personally believe that trying to replicate meat at all costs is a true lack of creativity and a very low consideration for consumers' ability to change. There are so many possibilities with plant-based protein that I wonder why try to disguise their taste as meat. That said, maybe changes will be accelerated by fast food chains, such as Burger King, that develop a vegetarian alternative. They have a real scale and power over consumer preference that it cannot be neglected. McDonald's is also testing the market with its McPlant. And here, I would like to make a call to action here to not let only the fast food chain and high-tech startup build the plant-based future, but to think of potential alternative to fast food and high-tech burgers. Let's move up to the food chain and meet Sylvie. Sylvie, she is a polyculture farmer, and she transformed her parents' dairy farm in a modern polyculture farm, leveraging the power of biology, fungus, bacteria, worms to keep her soil healthy. Compared to her parents, Sylvie runs a much more knowledge-intensive farms using both insights from biology, agronomy, and technology. To help her, monitoring her farm operations, she regularly rents a drone from her local group to perform crop and soil analysis at scale. It provides her with useful insights as to how to better predict soil fertility and scan for potential plant disease. Robots having drastically improved in performance and decreased in cost, she also rents one to help her with weeding and harvesting. Many startups are building solutions to monitor soil organic matter, moisture, water stress, crop development through drone and spatial imagery. So it's the trend here, crop and field mapping. Imagery costs have dropped and combined with machine learning, we can today perform in-depth analysis at scale. So the objective is to provide information, insights, to reduce chemical treatments, water usage, better predict disease early on. Agriculture data ownership and sharing is a strategic asset and can have value to predict yields, optimize crop rotations. And we should not find ourselves in the position of asking US or let's say Chinese tech giants information about soil fertility in France, in Europe. However, today the cost benefit of such technologies is not perfectly clear, as performances today vary between size of farms and type of crops. And if we look on the long term, efficiency gains are usually absorbed through lower market prices, creating a zero-sum game for farmers. So cloud agronomics, with one of these startups, it uses hyperspectral imaging to measure the presence of carbon and other elements in the soil and scans for plant diseases through the light they reflect. Carbon storage in the soil is considered as one of the key levers to tackle climate change, and cloud agronomics could help monitor it at scales and monitor at scale the effect of farming practices on carbon storage, and potentially help farmers receive payment for environmental services like carbon storage. Today, they sell their service mostly to insurers, financiers for land investment management projects, and agribusinesses. The last trend I wanted to discuss is precision agriculture. So advances in robotics, computer science enable to create more and more complex robots. Maybe you've seen the video of Boston Dynamics robots dancing on the "Do You Love Me" song, highlighting how good robots have become. We know that labor shortage in agriculture can be a real challenge, and we see that when border closes due to COVID, foreign labor workforce isn't able to cross borders and come working in the field. In addition, working conditions can sometimes be pretty bad, like in some large-scale tomato facilities in Spain. So robots can thus help in this context. However, agricultural robots are still extremely expensive today and not as precise as humans. And furthermore, we believe that it shouldn't be a factor of additional in-depthness for farmers. That said, there are many initiatives, and the last example is Biotechnology is a French startup that builds weeding robots for vineyards and salads, and they use mechanical weeding and use camera and laser for plant recognition and guidance. Weeding job can take up to a third of the time for legume growers, and it is one of the most tiring and consuming tasks. Hence, NIO added value for farmers. But still, feedback we see is that the robot is still very expensive and need more refinement to properly work. So in conclusion, and before opening it to the roundtable, I'd like to end with 3 call to action for you, 3 topics of exploration that I hope you will want to jump in with us. First, 1/3 of the food we produce is wasted, and we are convinced that supply chain models need to be completely revisited to help curb food waste. Being able to predict demand production in uncertain times, leveraging new data sources and models will be key in the future. There are no standard ways of speaking about food in a computer understandable language. So we'd like to help you with building the next generation API, data platforms, and IT infrastructures to tackle these challenges. Second is the distribution to ensure that sustainable food is accessible to everybody. New distribution and business model enabled by digital will fuel the transformation, like we saw with Dark Kitchen or Short Circuit example. How will they impact your value chain? What are the opportunities to transform your business model? What digital platform is strategic or not? Those are questions that we'd like to help you answer. And finally, helping driving the change to our more plant-rich diets will require creativity, understanding what are the drivers of plant-based product consumption, and building new go-to-market models, less mass-market oriented and closer to consumers. That is the last area in which Fabernovel can help you explore and build new models. So, to discuss all of these challenges more concretely, I'm very pleased to welcome to the stage Montse Muñoz, VP Operation Transformation at Danone, and Vandenbossche, President of Globale, farmer and VP of Advitam, an agriculture cooperative. Montse oversees the transformation of the operations team at Danone to become an organization that is closer to their local customer needs. Danone has been undergoing a strong transformation following its ambition, One Planet, One Health. Globale is an association launched 3 years ago by more than 100 companies from the agri-food sectors, from producers, transformers, distributors. It aims at creating a farm-to-fork scoring on 6 dimensions: animal welfare, environment, nutrition, traceability and economic contribution, and corporate social responsibility. So, first question for you, Montse, and I will stop sharing my screen so we can see more precisely your face. I know that Danone has been championing health through food since its inception. So can you tell us how Danone keeps that promise with growing demand for plant-based food? And what are the operational impacts in terms of sourcing and transformation for plant-based products?
Thank you, Adrien, for the very inspiring and eye-opener picture of the future. You were tapping on 3 topics that are really crucial. And when it comes to the plant-based development, again, you were mentioning, let's say, the Danone commitment to stay, let's say, honoring its commitments when it comes to driving health through food, but also being sustainable in a planet. And that's why the signature One Planet, One Health need to go together for us. And we make it formally in 2017 as the one way to really represent the company. At the same time, Danone was born in 1919, willing to bring health through food. So by producing yogurts and selling them in pharmacies back in Barcelona. So that was the very early piece. And ever since, it's really been obsessed about food, but also making the choices that health need to come along with. And for us, protein content and nutritional balanced products have always been the way to shape the portfolio of the company. And as we, as society and consumers, we've been evolving, there are different sources of protein, there are different sources of bringing nutritional nicely and balanced products in our diets. And we are really obsessed by promoting healthy eating and drinking habits. So as we progress as a company, as the society progresses, Danone had the opportunity to acquire a big player in the plant-based universe, being White Wave, an American company, where in Europe, let's say the brand is called Alpro, and let's say the company operating in Europe is under the Alpro name. And that really helped Danone to start really setting a platform where we could really go for maximizing this right balance between the different sources of protein, and to really addressing, because again, no one is purely sometimes based on, let's say, dairy protein-based protein or plant-based, and really being able to have something that resonates to a flexitarian consumer, so we can choose at a given time what is the best source of protein we want. That was something, it was an asset the company was really needing to have in place. So obviously that opens up for plenty of opportunities, as well as really rethinking, as you were saying, how to bring the right nutritional balance from a protein perspective into the daily consumption. So in that sense, today, plant-based is one of the growth spaces we are aiming to push forward, because it resonates to consumers very heavily, as well as what is the mission of Danone about having a portfolio which is more balanced and as well looking for the long-term sustainability. And that links also about how we relate upstream with our sourcing network and the practices that we put in place.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to turn to Anne, and prior to turning to Anne, just a quick reminder, if you want to ask questions, and we will take 10 to 15 minutes in the end to ask the question you might have directly to Anne and Montse and for me. So you have the Q&A box, and you can use it starting from now, and we will take the question in the end. So Anne, to touch on what Montse was saying, as consumers, we are bombarded with contradictory injunctions on food. So we should eat bio, local, vegetarian, green, low carbon, healthy, gluten-free, etc., etc. So it drives us crazy. So can you tell us, how does La Note Globale aim at giving back food decision-making informations to consumers? And how can it contribute to maybe healthier diets in the future?
Thank you, Adrien, and thanks again for your very interesting presentation. You've mentioned quite a lot of very important issues during that time. And you're right, food has become extremely complex in the last maybe 50 years approximately, and many of us as customers are sometimes totally lost when it comes to choosing a food product. Not so far ago, consumers were more worried about food availability and food safety, but now this is just taken for granted. So nowadays, the expectations have shifted to other topics. Nutrition and health are certainly some of the key issues, along with environment, animal welfare, traceability, corporate responsibility, and origin and fair trade. So the very first objective of La Note Globale is precisely to help the customer make his own decision according to his own criteria. It is not up to La Note Globale to choose for him. It is our role to provide reliable information, enough information, understandable data for him to make his own decision. And that covers the whole production process from the farm to the retailer in order, again, for him to decide. Because there is not such a thing as a customer. There are billions of customers, and they don't have identical priorities, don't have all the same criteria. So for La Note Globale, that implies to check precisely what the allegation means. A local product can be a good and healthy product, but local doesn't mean good and healthy. An organic product can be a good and healthy product, but organic in itself doesn't mean good and healthy. So we have identified about 7 key points specifically about nutrition and health, which need to be checked and evaluated, and again, at each level of the production process. And those key points, for example, involve ingredients, fabrication process, packaging system, food safety, organization, for example. That all leads to a nutrition performance indicator. And that's not black and white or white. That is not good or not good. It's a grade. And that grade will change if practices change. So if a customer is specifically interested in a healthier diet, he will consider specifically the performance index of a given product on the nutrition and health issue. This will give him a comprehensive information of the performance of that product. And if nutrition is his priority, then he will pick the product with a better grade. So that's quite a simple system.
Perfect. Thank you very much for these insights on how does La Note Globale could help us contributing to healthier diets and providing us with more information. It's true that there is a lot of innovation happening in the scoring. There was the new T-score that was launched some time ago, and we see a lot of things happening, trying to help consumers make more informed choices. So now I would like to move on to the next topic of conversation, which is sustainability and regenerative agriculture. So I have a question for you, Montse. In the global approach, like Anne mentioned, they integrate farmers in the scoring definition to make them actors of the food system transformation. So it's not something that is imposed of them, but they contribute to the thinking behind the scoring, so they are part of the transformation. So I know that Danone is engaged in regenerative agriculture practices, and that Danone builds a partnership with farmers. So could you tell us a bit more about this project, and what value do you see for Danone going upstream and building partnership with farmers? And do you think it makes a difference from a consumer point of view?
Well, first I would say that this is not a project or a set of projects. That's really an integral part of the operating model of the company that has been growing and evolving as many things, and ourselves, and as was mentioning, the interest of many players, not just consumer, but also regulators and administration. Different stakeholders have been evolving on that point. I'm saying so because obviously Danone, as a dairy company in its very origins, cannot do anything without really having the best milk available. And that was really the origin of working with farmers when it comes to the milk sourcing. And certainly that was something that was very heavily developed in all the countries operating, by really making sure that there is a long-lasting relationship with the farmers, that we can really work together on what was the best way to raise the cows, and that eventually aiming at having the best fresh milk that was ending in the products and paying a fair price for that. So that's been something that it's been part of the operating model of the company, but obviously all this way of working has also been enlarging to integrate not just the milk, but at a given time, if we were putting fruit preps, well, what are these fruit preps about? Also about what is the overall expectation in terms of what is the nutritional profile the products need to have. Also by changing our transformation practices, but also transforming the practices in the upstream of the value chain, and that is the way that we've been really evolving to really secure sustainable sourcing, fair pricing when it comes to really driving that at the suppliers, and really looking for the elements that also you were mentioning on when it comes to sustainability, and also when it comes, in this case, there was a lot of, on the cows involved for the welfare of the animals itself. So today this has become into a funding mechanism to really develop good practices, not just in developed countries. I wanted to also make this little point because in your introduction, Adrien, of course, you were referring to startups in France, the context that we live more in as, let's say, European content. But we also operate in development areas, and with very different needs from a consumer and also sourcing perspectives. So this element of regenerative agriculture, taking care of the livelihoods and the communities we operate in, for us, it's part of this regenerative agriculture program across the different markets we play in. And again, it's something you cannot do alone. So it's about really building the right partnerships with different players. It can be from universities that can provide the insights on how to do this sustainability development better. It's also about working with not just the farmer itself, but how are we feeding, in this case, cows, to make sure that then the milk that is produced does deliver lower environmental impact. Sorry, but flatulation is something that it's really impacting on that piece. As well as really having the best quality from a protein, fat content, nutritional content in that sense. And I could say the same thing when it comes to the main fruits and vegetables that are part of our program. Integrating the resonating requirements for consumers when it comes to organic and naturality. So all those is how are you shaping the way you design the product to make it simple meaning that less ingredients involved, yet obviously preserving what from a food safety perspective it has to be like, but at the same time how then is also impacting the different networks and federation of suppliers we operate with to make sure that the best practice to deliver best health and best planet can be preserved. So that's why it's not just, of course, we introduce that in projects or the way but it's truly part of the operating model of the company.
Thank you very much for the explanation and clarification on how Danone works with farmers. So Anne, you are not only president of Danone Global, but you also run a farm yourself. And it's true that farmers are subjected to many constraints and specifications from the food chain. So can you tell us how Danone Global is changing the power relationship and giving back some of it to farmers? And how do you see the role of Danone Global to help in changing towards more sustainable farming practices?
And again, you mentioned the fact that I'm a farmer, and it's true that's my job, you know, my daily job. And I have production either for traditional production like wheat or sugar beet production, for example, or potato production. We mentioned McDonald's and McCain is heavily implemented around here in north of Paris. I also have production for short circuits, so I know those both sides of the farming production and the different relationship we have with different types of customers. I'm really glad to hear Montse talk about partnership and about the fact that when you want to improve the whole food production system, you really cannot do that just by yourself. You need to involve other partners, either suppliers or customers. And Danone Global is from the beginning, again, a collaborative project. When a product is being evaluated by Danone Global, all value chain actors are considered, not only the last one, not only the brand name, because all food supply chain partners are important, from the wheat farmers to the retailers. Danone Global promotes discussion between them all because we realized the fact that because it has become so complex, we very often don't know very well the other partner's job or constraints or objectives or point of view. So by sharing information, we understand each other much better. We don't also assume that one knows better than the other. So we share experiences and know-how. And this kind of relationship is already quite unique because you don't find that at each corner to have competitors or farmers talking to distributors or food processors. That's not very common so far. So if a brand name wants to get a global grade of its product from Danone Global, just like Montse mentioned, it's not something that can be done just by themselves. They need to involve all suppliers and among them farmers. Farmers in general are very far from the end customer. So it's very hard for them to communicate directly with them. There is no room on the label for him. And even if you look closely at a product, you won't have any info on the farmer's product practices. So that's why I really believe that Danone Global is a perfect opportunity for farmers to highlight their practices. Because when a farmer chooses tolerant varieties of wheat to reduce the use of pesticide, that is good practice. When a farmer has beehives on his farm or hedges, that is good practice. When a farmer accepts schoolboys or students as trainees on his farm, that is good practice again. But those examples are not directly related to the product. And that type of information is not is totally unavailable at the moment. Yet this reflects part of the farmer's performance, and to some customers that is very valuable. So the scoring system from Danone Global naturally promotes information and product improvement, because there are different levels of each performance evaluation, and you get a better score if you do a better job. And that's true for farmers, and that's true for all food value chain partners. So Danone Global is a great way for farmers to bring that information forward, to make it available to the end customers, even information which are not directly to the related to the product, but that are about the daily practice method of the farmers. And it's a great way also, since you get a better grade if you do a better job, to promote improvement. And once you have identified your weaknesses, then you can work on it. And that's the beginning of a new story. Then you decide where you put more energy, more people, or more investment.
Perfect. Thank you very much for clarifying the role of Danone Globale in helping farmers, highlighting more their good practices to the consumers. So now I would like to move to our last topic, which is short circuits, supply chain traceability, that we've spoke a lot about during the introduction. So it's a question for Montse. We hear a lot about short food supply chain, farmers market, direct sales model, and COVID shed a light on these new models, but also highlighted the risk in having an international supply chain. So Danone being an international group, I was curious about how does Danone approach food supply chain relocalization, and do you see a potential for relocalizing production and transformation closer to markets and consumers? And if so, what are the operational impacts for Danone?
Sorry, because I had muted myself. So that is such a broad question because, again, there are many different players that are impacting the way we need to look at the operational footprint and setup. Certainly, there is what are the expectations from consumer society. Secondly, and COVID has brought that into some discussions that maybe we thought it was a bit far away, but also the degree of protectionism that in some countries the situation has brought back for discussion. And we've seen that in different places in the world. So that is something to be taken into account. There's an element of resilience. How do you truly build resilient supply chain that can go through the difficulties we've experienced through COVID, but not just, I mean, the environmental difficulties and many others. And also the sustainability commitments that collectively as a society, and in our case, as a company in Danone, we need to stick to and make sure that we really are very contributing. So for us, the 2030 United Nations goals are really determining a lot the way we are driving the agenda of the company, including how to set those supply chain and lead times and ways of reaching consumers, which again become more sustainable. Does it mean that is a complete shift to localizing? No. Does it mean that in certain geographies we are reassessing and acting on projects to make sure that it becomes much closer, in this case, to the local consumptions? We see food is very local. I mean, in our portfolio, there is a part of it which is addressed, what we call medical food, which is addressed to patients' nutritional needs, which would be a very different discussion because it's the physical condition that is determining the nutritional requirements for these for our patients. But when we're talking about healthy consumers, this is food is very much locally rooted, and this is something you cannot separate from. If you want to stay meaningful for these consumers and this society, you have to go back to this localized way of looking at it. And that also has an impact on how we need to be sourcing from materials, from ingredients and production and distribution. So it is a continuous element that it's really in our continuous, let's say, network footprint design and assessment to make it reasonable. It's not just the changes in terms of what consumers want. Is also about how you were mentioning it, how food availability is changing in different countries. So again, how do you size yourself to make it more meaningful? And all that certainly has got an impact. Again, COVID has enhanced some of these features and needs, but or accelerated some of the shifts that we see in ourselves as consumers and society. But there are many other elements that are not just COVID related and that had already been part of our, let's say, going journey, and that certainly will keep being the case. So this is not a one-time element. It's part of our strategic planning processes every year, and it will keep being so, because it's the only way to stay, as I say, meaningful for the different stakeholders, from consumers, from regulators, administration, and the overall key players along the value chain. So something that it's here to really stay in our planning and execution in the future.
Thank you very much for the clarification on how Danone approaches relocalization. And question for Anne now. I know that part of Land Global scoring is focused on the local sourcing of products and the contribution of products to the French economy. So for raw products, it can be very simple to know where they come from, like tomato, potato, etc. But for simple transformed products such as bread, to more complex ones such as lasagnas, pizzas, it can be quite complex to have end-to-end traceability of all the ingredients that goes into a pizza or lasagna. So can you elaborate on how Land Global tackles these challenges, and what are the challenges related to capturing data all along the food chain?
Yeah, you're just spot on, Adrien, with that question, because not only do we eat more sophisticated products, but ingredients, and we've just mentioned that, and Montse, you talked about that just right now. Ingredients come from all over the world right now, and a simple pizza might involve hundreds of suppliers and for different ingredients. So that question about the number of information we need to gather relates to the origin, but not only. It relates to all different topics that we work at Demand Global. In the end, we estimate that only 15 to maybe 20% of food data are readily available at the moment. If you look at the whole chain, not only the last one, again, I'm talking about the farming, production, and all intermediate food processors. So if you consider hundreds of suppliers, ingredients coming from all over the world, and issues being worked at Demand Global about different topics like environment, nutrition, and corporate responsibility, it means that, in fact, 80% of the data is missing. So you cannot get a good idea of the performance of a product with so little information. We cannot do it. We can do it only seriously if that data is gathered, stored, that it is checked to make sure that it is reliable, and if you are able to also to do it in a dynamic mode. It's not only a question of having the information on the 26th of January. It's to have it all year long, and that makes it also quite complicated. So the first step in that is to realize and to admit that we know so little. The second step is to accept to mobilize energy, people, investment on that issue. Third step, I would say, is to accept the data, even sometimes if they don't please us. And fourth step is to accept to share that information, to create that partnership with all different intermediate and final distributors. The point is, even though I've mentioned the different difficulties, the point is we have no choice. We have told the customer for years that our food was safe and reliable, and that is true in 99.9% of the cases. We cannot tell him now that in fact we know so little. So we have to meet the challenge and to do our best to gather the data that is missing. We are confident that it can be done if we all cooperate. And I, again, mentioned the fact that Demand Global is from the very beginning a collaborative project. A lot can be certainly achieved with automation. At least I hope that this is part of the answer. And to impulse development in data acquisition, we've submitted a project for the investment for the future, a PSPC, at the French BPI. We also have contact with the EU Farm to Fork project, because those challenges are not just French issues. It's at least European and probably worldwide problem. So we need, to not only to work by ourselves, but again, to work together with other structures responsible in the world who are aware that these are main issues and that time is ticking. Customers are just waiting to have more and more information. So we cannot just tell them, well, just wait a minute, we'll invest a few millions and maybe in a year, 2 years or 5 years time, we'll be able to answer a question. They ask question now. So we need to be extremely active to be able to answer the question in a proper way. So there are related questions to a data acquisition, of course, who owns the data, where are they stored? So there's a lot of work to be done, but we need to start now when it's not already started. It's very important.
Thank you very much. So I see that the clock is ticking and we have some questions coming onto the chat. So maybe the last concluding question. So it will be the same question for you too. And I'd like to start with Montse. So at Fabernovel, we like to help our clients develop their best future self through innovative projects. And I wonder, when was the last time you did something for the first time at Danone? And if you could launch a new project at Danone, what would it be?
Well, in my job title for the last 15 months, it shows transformation. So I hope I am, and I'm truly obsessed about driving the degree of change and evolution that we need. So we have a set of different axes to really drive this transformation. Today is not the one project. I really want to work on I call it the million of baby steps that really will take us to make that degree of change. I would echo what Anne was saying, that the one that we are working, and it's really bringing a complete different on how we look at things, is what we call the transparency and traceability from an end-to-end perspective in the value chain, which is a massive and very complex way to address, because it's not just the data. The technology is there, but it's how do we leverage that? How we do connect the different players? How do we make it resonating to consumers? It's not what you push in terms of data, it's the pull that really makes the difference. So for me, that's the biggest transformation element that we need to do. And again, it involves all the players, both internally and externally. It's about really having an ecosystem that shares the same need. If we don't share across the value chain the need of being transparent and the need of really then taking the actions that resonate for the collective of the value chain, and not just looking at one actor, but really the collective elements, it's going to be very hard to succeed. So again, that would be one thing. I have to choose only one, and that would be maybe the one I would be choosing.
Thank you very much. And same thing for you, Anne. When was the last time you did something for the first time at Vitam or Globale? And if you could launch something new at Globale, what would it be?
I would say the last time I did something for the first time at Vitam is maybe last month, when I got involved in a carbon impact measurement project for the farmers. It's certain that farming practices have an impact on greenhouse gas emission, and that we hope that it can store a lot and that it can have a very positive action. So I got involved in that last month, and I have a meeting tomorrow actually about that to help document that. I'm very excited about it because I think it could be a very interesting and very positive topic to bring together citizens and farmers. So that would be a very, very good thing. And for the new project at Globale, I would say that it could be the development of a global rating system like we have developed for food products, but for other types of products, such as cosmetic, building industry, clothing, or even investments. We've had talks already with different partners, and expectation from customers about, again, cosmetic or investments are quite similar to what we have on food, or at least there are some comparisons that can be used and developed. So it's almost obvious that Globale could have some small sisters in other industry businesses.
Well, looking forward to see them. So we have two questions coming up on the slide, on the chat. So maybe the first one is for you, Anne. It loops back to the adoption on new technologies by farmers, and the person was wondering, do you have some feedback on the adoption and adhesion of new technologies by farmers? Is it useful? Is it interesting? And what will it take for farmers to adopt new technologies on the farm?
Well, I think farmers are very practical people in general. So whatever works today is used today by many farmers. I'm quite certain that we use many more new technology than what normal citizens think we do. So there are a lot of things, like you showed imagery earlier on during the presentation. This is used by a large number of farmers to determine the level of fertilizer that we need to apply on our different crops. So this is done already. And we are very interested in new tech because we know that this will be part of the answer to some of the questions. You showed those little robots to do the weeding in salad, for example. I'm just waiting for them to be readily available and to be maybe a little bit cheaper, if that's possible. But as soon as this will be totally available and affordable for farms, we will use that. We are just waiting for them to be more developed, and we are also waiting for new developments. So I hope that nobody thinks that farmers are just working like we did 60 or 70 years ago. Whatever new technology is available, we'll use that.
So yes, it's already a very tech-rich environment on the farm. So the last question would be for Montse. It was a question on, would Danone be ready to show products rating of independent label on its packaging, and how does Danone tackles product scoring questions?
Thanks for the question, because again, as we stand for One Health and bringing health through food, anything that really helps convey this information in a concise, precise, accurate, and meaningful way to consumers will always be of the not just the interest of the company, but something to promote. And on that sense, we've been intensively working to make sure that this is consistent across the industry. Again, with the seeking for this transparency, we also believe, and Anne was tapping on it, that information needs to come in an understandable way and meaningful way and kind of comparable way, if at the end of the day what we want is really consumer to be equipped for choosing. And on that sense, we've been actively working with many players to today is the Nutri-Score system that it's being adopted as the way in Europe to provide this information to consumer in a validated manner by all players, again, from regulators all the way to industry players and also to retailers and consumers. And on that sense, this is an information that it is showing in the products. It's something that we are working to make, let's say, available. In some countries, the full portfolio is already showing the Nutri-Score. In some others, is work in progress. But for us, it's very important that the nutritional balance that we take, it is known, as well as the actions taken, which are not from now, but from years ago, like working on reducing the number of ingredients in a given product to make it as genuine as possible to what the product is, reducing the sugar content, because again, if we're always been very much up for promoting healthy eating and drinking habits, you need to constantly be looking at your formulations are at the level, not the recommendations from the only from the World Health Organization, which are key, like the PAOs and NOWS policies and so on, but something that it really resonates more and more. So in our sense, we will never be against showing that. What we believe is that that has to be done, in a way that it speaks well and provides the accurate information, and it's well integrated and accepted by the different players. And when I say players, I go back to the regulators, authorities, industry players, suppliers, retailers. So on that sense, we are active, and we will keep being active to make sure that this transparency comes across, like I said.
Well, thank you so much, Anne and Montse. It's 1 p.m. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. And if you are interested to discuss more about it, you have my email, and please get in touch. It was great to have you here today. Thank you so much, and bon appétit for those that will have lunch. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Goodbye.